Alright, here we are on the draw, and we've got double Oath, which is kind of not the greatest, but hand's fine. We would like something like a Gideon to be able to curve into. Our opponent's led with a mountain, so let's see what's going on here. Maybe it's the blue-red deck. Okay, yeah, it's going to be some sort of blue-red deck because our opponent has discarded an island with the Tormenting Voice there. So we're definitely hoping to dodge something like Fevered Visions. That card is great against our deck, and our opponent is casting it here. So that's very bad. And now we've got a bit of a decision. We don't really have a great play here, so I'm just going to pass the turn. And now we get to discard something, so I think we can just pitch an Oath here. And we can plan on casting the Secure the Waste if we need to. It's just going to depend what our opponent does this turn. So yeah, our opponent is not doing anything at all, so we are going to have to... We just want to use up cards in our hand. We also have a second Secure, so we're definitely going to cast this one here. And try to start some sort of... get an attack going a little bit here. Get some momentum going. But we'll see. It could be that our opponent has some removal that they want to fire off on these warrior tokens. But I think the plan is just going to be to jam the Gideon here. We're racing against this Fever Visions, which isn't fun. And we've just got to try to get as aggressive as possible. And it's pretty likely our opponent has some direct damage, so the Gideon is definitely not safe at all. Our opponent can redirect the damage from Fever Visions to Gideon, so that's something we have to worry about. There's a Fiery Impulse going after the 2/2 Knight that we just made. But we definitely want to try to get cards out of our hand. And that's what this play is allowing us to do. And so, as expected, the Gideon is now down to 2, but we did draw another one off of the Fevered Visions trigger during our end step. And our opponent has yet to play any sort of creature, noticeably. This deck does tend to play cards like Thermo Alchemist, Jace, Thing in the Ice. We definitely do not want to see Fevered Visions number 2. We'd much rather see a creature that we can deal with. Okay, it looks like it's going to be Collective Defiance. So that's going to take care of the Gideon and a token. And pretty unfortunate here that we're going to be missing a land drop. That's really not what we wanted to have happen, but not too much that can be done here. So we're just going to go ahead and play our next Gideon and make the same play. Our opponent could very well go after this Gideon as well. And in fact, I would be surprised if that didn't happen. But we just want to get creatures into play, have some pressure going. We definitely want to avoid something like a Chandra. That would be very bad for us here. Okay, here's a Storm Chaser Mage. That's also bad. That's a creature that can attack our Gideon, so with one other spell, this Gideon could hit the bin. But since we're playing these Gideons, we're at least preserving our life total because our opponent's going after Gideon rather than our face. So we're getting towards the point where we can think about a big Secure the Waste and then flipping Westvale Abbey. That could be our endgame plan for this game. So here's an Incendiary Flow, and that's going to be enough to get rid of our Gideon here. And the draw step here is Planar Outburst. So I think now is a pretty reasonable time to get this Oath into play, but let's go ahead and attack first. So the Oath of Liliana is going to get rid of the Storm Chaser Mage here. And we might as well fire off this Transgress the Mind, but it might not get anything. It's hard to say. Our opponent does have 5 cards in hand, though. Oh, wow. So our opponent has... Okay, well, it's definitely going to get something. Our opponent has Lightning Axe, Double Fiery Temper, Collective Defiance, and Fever Visions. Wow. That's a lot of burn. Wow. So I mean, this is basically 9 points of burn, but I think we still have to take the Fevered Visions. It's not a fun spot to be in. We're actually in now that we've seen our opponent's hand, we're in a pretty bad spot. That's just a lot of direct damage to have to deal with. And our opponent also has a Fevered Visions that's going to continually also deal damage to us. So, not the best. Here's a Collective Defiance, which is going to get rid of our token and bring us down to 12. So we know that the 3 cards in hand, 3 of our opponent's cards, and here is a Transgress the Mind. So we can cast that to get rid of one of these Fiery Tempers. So I think that is going to be the play here. So we can get rid of a Fiery Temper. And we don't want to cast this Read the Bones. That would just deal us essentially 3 more damage. So we're just going to pass back. We're looking still to Secure the Waste. The Wandering Fumarole is a little bit of a problem here. And our opponent's going to Tormenting Voice. And so, yeah, I mean, our life total's just evaporating right before our eyes here. And that's what this deck does. The Fever Visions is basically... turn 3 Visions is just super, super hard to deal with. And we're seeing that. And we're still 1 or 2 turns away from really being able to secure and then threaten flipping Westvale Abbey into Ormondal. So we're looking for something maybe like a Sorin. And okay, here's a Collective Defiance. That's just going to go straight at our face here. Hallowed Moonlight. Not really what we wanted. This Fevered Visions is going to bring us all the way down to 2, but there's not really much that can be done. We're going to pass the turn here with the plan of casting Secure the Waste. So we can go ahead and secure now, but our opponent has the option of using removal to get rid of some of our tokens, and that's exactly what we don't want to have happen. So yep, there's a lightning axe. Smart play from our opponent to keep us off being able to flip Westville Abbey this turn. And our opponent had 2 copies of Lightning Axe. Well, this is not where we want it to be, obviously, but can fire up a Shambling Vent and get in there with it. We can also get in with... I guess we can get in with the tokens as well. Try to pressure our opponent as best as we can. And we're going to go down to 2 here from the Fevered Visions. And yeah, we can go ahead and pitch this Read the Bones. Won't be casting that one. And alright, yep, that Exquisite Firecraft is going to do it for game 1. But we have more options after board. So we're definitely going to board in the Duresses. Transgress is pretty good. We want to be able to attack our opponent's hand. We want to be able to attack our opponent's Fever Visions, so we're going to board in this Anguished Unmaking. Linvala is pretty good. It gains us life. We've actually got a lot of strong options here. Thought Knot, Reality Smasher, and Kalitas are all reasonable options. So let's think about what we want to board out. Read the Bones and Hallow Moonlight. Both are pretty ineffective. So is Ruinous Path. Languish. The mass removal we don't really need. We'd rather have spot removal. So I kind of like this configuration. We've got still 6 spot removal spells, although our opponent seems to not be playing as many creatures, so it could be that we want to cut these ultimate prices. We definitely want to keep the grasps. The fact that Read the Bones loses us 2 life makes it definitely a bit of a liability. But it may be that we want it just to be able to hit our 4th land drop, so I guess I'm fine with that. And if we see more creatures, we may make a swap for game 3. Alright, so here we are clearly missing some lands, but we've got double Transgress. This is a tough hand. We're going to be able to deal with what our opponent's doing, but we don't really have much action going on, so I think I'm going to mulligan it. And of course, the 6 is just a 1-lander, so now we're pretty much forced to keep all lands, which is pretty awkward, but hopefully we'll draw some spells here and get our way out of this one. When you mulligan down, and this is why I don't like to mulligan that much, sometimes you regret it, and in this case it's like, well, we could have just kept our first hand, but the first hand, it just didn't have any threats, and it didn't have enough lands. So even if we draw a threat, we wouldn't be able to cast it. if we draw a land, we wouldn't be able to cast a threat. So that's why I'm mulling in it. Hand was a little bit awkward. And Anguished Unmaking is pretty good, but it does lose us some life, so we have to be aware of that. And we just drew a copy of Anguished Unmaking here, actually. So we're really looking for our heavy hitter cards like Thought-Knot Seer, Kalidas. Linvala is a card we can draw into. So we're not really in necessarily that bad of a shape, even though our draws this game have not really panned out the way we wanted them to so far. And it looks like our opponent's just on the plan of burning us out. They have not actually, our opponent has not actually played any creatures so far. But we can go ahead and put this Gideon into play. I think we just want to go ahead and make a 2/2 here. Our opponent might have a removal spell for 1 red, so we'll see. We'll see if our opponent has something like a Fiery Impulse or Lightning Axe, perhaps. Okay, there's a Lightning Axe, so that's going to get rid of our 2/2, and so our opponent could actually activate the Wandering Fumarole and attack Gideon, or attack us. So we'll see which of those two options our opponent elects to go for here. And okay, the attack is coming at Gideon, so that's gonna do it for our Planeswalker here. But we did draw another one, so let's run that bad boy out there. And same thing, just making a 2/2. And this time, if our opponent attacks with Wandering Fumarole, we should have a blocker at the ready. So our opponent's got 4 cards in hand. We see that we're actually against a very spell-dense version of the blue-red deck. We normally are going to see more creatures, or at least some creatures. Now, this version just seems to have Wandering Fumarole. We saw the Stormchaser Mage, and that's it. Have not seen any pingers, anything in the ices, any jaces, anything like that up to this point. So we're still looking for something like a life gain effect, like a Linvala, a card we boarded in, like a Kalidas, like a Sorin. We've got these big mana cards, so we've got the lands. A Secure the Waste would be a nice one because we could potentially secure and then flip our Abbey. So we're not out of it yet, but obviously we don't know the contents of our opponent's hand. We don't know if they have a way of pressuring this Gideon or dealing 4 damage to the Gideon. And we'll see in a minute what's going on. Alright, here's an Incendiary Flow. So the question is, yep, so our opponent's just going straight to our face, is not bothering to redirect the Incendiary Flow to Gideon, but here is a copy of Sorin Grim Nemesis. So that's a pretty big draw, and I think we just want to go ahead and play it and see if our opponent has a counterspell or not. So we'll put it out there, and it looks like it is going to resolve. So we've got a couple of options here. We could tick it down to just simply gain some life. I don't know that we really need to do that quite yet. I think we can afford to tick it up, actually. And there's the Reality Smasher. So our opponent's now down to 15. And I think we can definitely make a 2/2 here. And I don't think we need to do much more. So let's just go ahead and pass the turn. And we'll see what our opponent's got. Looks like they're just going to untap, so it's unclear exactly what's in our opponent's hand. But our board is suddenly looking a lot better. Next turn we can potentially play Reality Smasher. Yes, our opponent's got 4 cards in hand, but things are looking up. And this is why we mulligan the first 2 hands, is we just want our lands so that if we draw a big thing, even one big spell can really change the game around. And now with the Sorin in play, if our opponent tries to burn us out, we can always minus our Sorin and use it as a way to gain life. And if our opponent goes after the creatures, we can just use the Sorin to threaten our opponent's life total. So our opponent is going to cast Incendiary Flow here. And it looks like the Incendiary Flow is going to go straight to us, so that's going to be put us down to 7, but our opponent's only got 2 cards left in hand. And here's a Blighted Fen as the draw for the turn. So I think we're in a relatively safe spot, but doesn't mean we shouldn't still be careful. Gonna play this Reality Smasher here. And I think we want to actually plus the Gideon. And we're pretty favored to actually be able to win on our next turn. So we can just go ahead and attack our opponent here. And then we can tick down our Sorin. So, since Gideon... Well, I think we want to... Yeah, we can just go ahead and minus our Sorin. Shouldn't really matter too much what we go after. I think we just minus our Sorin on Reality Smasher, and we can do that for 4. So that's going to put us up to 11 life, and we're going to have 2 blockers left. So I think our opponent's probably going to be packing it in here. And we could have tried to risk it a little bit by plussing Sorin, but it just isn't necessary on this board. We're in such a commanding spot. Even 2 direct burn spells for 4 damage each would only put us down to 3. And yeah, it looks like we're going to be going to game 3 now. So we haven't seen many creatures from our opponents, so our board strategy looks pretty good. I don't actually know that we want to change too much. We've got these grasps for Wandering Fumarole and Storm Chaser Mage. Obnixilis is a card we maybe just do want to board out. I could definitely see wanting to board out Obnixilis. So if we board out Obnixilis, Ruinous Path does get rid of Storm Chaser Mage as well, but it's for 3 mana rather than 2, like a Grasp. Hallowed Moonlight is a card we could use just to cycle and draw a card, but I think we can board in a Ruinous Path here. And guess I like keeping in one Omnixilus, even though this isn't really the matchup for that card. So we'll try this. We definitely got some cards that are not great against burn strategies, because so many of our cards lose us life. And once again, we've got a pretty awkward hand here. So we are just going to have to mulligan, searching for some more lands here. And so we found some more lands. So basically, any hand with lands at this point, I'm willing to keep. But now we're looking to find some gas, I think. So I'm going to put the Forsaken Sanctuary on the bottom. And there's that ruinous path that we just boarded in, so we'll see if it does anything at all. We've got 3 removal spells right now, so we would like something that could effectively attack our opponent's hand. But so far we have not drawn a card like that. So it could be that we're going to see something like a Fevered Visions here. We would like our opponent to play a creature this turn, so we would be able to play a removal spell to get rid of that creature. But it does not look like that's what's going to happen. And here's a Collective Defiance. It looks like our opponent is actually just going to cycle their hand. So we see 2 Dispels, a Firecraft, and a Lightning Axe. So our opponent was able to get rid of all those cards, deal us 3, and then completely cycle through their hand. But you know what? We don't even mind that much, because that's going to leave us this opening now to cast our Gideon. And we have the option here if we want to tick it up or zero it. And I think we do want to zero it. However, if our opponent does have an Exquisite Firecraft, that would be able to trade with our Gideon, but it would still leave us with a 2/2 left over. And it looks like the play here is actually going to be Fevered Visions. And there's Kalidas right off the top. So that's a pretty good card to have in this spot. I don't mind just going ahead and plussing our Gideon here and attacking and just trying to get a little bit aggressive. And rather than going after this Fever Visions, we can get our Kalidas into play right now. So it looks like our opponent may have tried to redirect the damage to Gideon, but since we had plussed Gideon, we were able to prevent that damage. So that's a pretty interesting interaction there. Doesn't come up too often. And it looks like our opponent is struggling here because they are activating this Gaia Reach Sanitarium. So we're just going to discard a land here. And here's a Tormenting Voice. So this Kalidas looks like it's actually going to be able to get a hit in. And our opponent's in a really, really tough spot. Yeah, I mean, we're not really that worried about our life total at the moment. Our opponent does have a pretty full grip, so I don't mind going ahead and transgressing here to see exactly what's going on. So we see Fiery Temper. along with Dispel and Tormenting Voice. So, yep, it looks like that's just going to be the match. Our opponent didn't really have a way to get rid of Kalidas or Gideon, and also didn't really have anything in hand. So, that's going to do it.